Hello, this is video 4 for Unit 3, Development and Learning. This video will be talking about communication and language development. So this is really a continuation of our last video, which was cognitive development. This specifically is going to be looking at language, however. And the questions you should be able to answer at the end of this video are, how do key components of language and communication apply to behavior and mental processes? And how does language develop in humans? So first of all, let's define what language is. Language is our spoken, written, or gestured word. It is the way we communicate meaning to ourselves and to others. So when we say that it is spoken, written, or gestured, that means that language is really everything that we use to communicate. It can be our actual words that come out of our mouth, the words we write on a piece of paper, images we draw, but also things like sign language and our facial expressions. All of these things are included when we're talking about language and language development. Now that we know what language is, let's look at the different parts that make up language or the components of language. The first thing is the phonemes. Phonemes are the smallest unit of sound that make up our words. So you can see some examples here in this chart. The S sound in sat, the T in tap, in pan, etc., etc. So phonemes are the smallest unit of sound. Sometimes those sounds are more than one letter long, right? Like air is a sound, but that is one phoneme, or is one phoneme. These are different from syllables, as syllables can sometimes include more than one sound, but phonemes are one sound that we are hearing. The next unit is morphemes. Morphemes are the smallest unit of meaning in words. So I always think about morphemes with that M, meaning. So morphemes are when we look at a word, we can break it apart for the different pieces that we've added to that word to make a unit of meaning. So for example, if you look at our chart here, you can see that our base word of house has just one morpheme, right? There is just that word house. However, if we look at the next word of jumped, we have two morphemes. We have the base word of jump, and then we've added the suffix of ed, which adds the past tense. We can sometimes have multiple morphemes in one word. For example, in the word informational, we have 5 morphemes. We have a prefix, our root word, we have a suffix, another suffix, and a third suffix. So all of these things go together to make one main word. The next component of language you should know about are grammar. So grammar is the set of rules that we use that govern language. Oftentimes when we're thinking about grammar in school, we're thinking about punctuation. But grammar really is how we put everything together, how we make our language make sense, how we put things in order in our sentences. So in the English language, we put our subject first, and then we put the verb after that. But in other languages, sometimes that verb comes first. We also need to talk about semantics. Semantics are the meanings of particular words. So understanding what a word is. So this is going to help you understand the definition. What are some words that are similar to it? Those synonyms. Antonyms, that are words that are different from them, and then all different aspects of what that word means to us. So think of this kind of as like your vocab words when you're learning what they mean and how you can use them and where you can use them in our sentences. Next, we have syntax, and syntax is the structure of words in a sentence. So how we put them in order in our sentence. So all of this falls under the house of grammar, but syntax allows us to put them in a way that makes sense so that we can have a full understanding of language. So all of these different pieces work together to make our language. These pieces of language develop through experience, through direct instruction of children, but really most of our language comes through experiencing the world around us and experiencing language. It is really difficult for someone to learn language if they've never been exposed to it in a full exposure situation. Think about you trying to learn a new language in high school. It's really difficult for you to fully embrace that language and speak it fluently if you've never been in a situation where that language is the only thing that you can use. Whereas babies or young children who are in homes that speak multiple languages will grow up understanding the rules of that language much easier and in a way that is fluent to them. This exposure to language comes in what we call a critical period. Our critical periods are early stages in life when an organism is especially open to specific learning, emotional, or socializing experiences that occur as part of normal development. If you do not experience that particular thing by this critical period, you will never be able to fully develop that skill. So, for example, in language, we have a critical period of about 7 years. So, those first 7 years of your life, you need to be exposed to language. If you are not exposed to any language in those first 7 years of your life, you will struggle the rest of your life to incorporate language into your development. In fact, you will never be able to understand language the same way as if you were exposed to it during that critical period. Again, think about learning a language when you are a toddler versus when you're in high school learning the second language. It doesn't mean you'll never learn it. It just means that you'll never master it. So let's talk about the different stages of language acquisition. The very first stage that we all go through is the cooing stage. This is in infants, and these are vowel-like sounds produced by young infants, and these tend to give off the emotion of happiness or feeling content. And so all babies will make this cooing sound, and it is a type of language because it expresses meaning to the adults around them. The next stage is the babbling stage, and this stage usually begins around 3 or 4 months. And in this stage, infants are going to make speech-like sounds that don't really have any meaning to them, but they're going to sound very similar to the diction and the emphasis that an adult would put on their language. So they might have higher points, or they might be actually sounding like they're having a full conversation with you, but the words that are coming out of their mouth don't make any sense. The next stage is the one-word stage. Usually this stage is about 1 year old. And this is when children are beginning saying actual words. In English, they are typically short words that start with a consonant, like B, D, M, P, or T. So ball, dada, mama. And so these words are usually the first words that a child will say. Children are capable of understanding quite a bit of the language they hear before they even start to say the words out loud. So even though a child might only be able to say the word mama, they still are understanding much of what adults are saying to them. The next stage is the two-word stage. We also call this telegraphic speech. And usually this is around 2 years old that children are falling into this two-word stage. And this is when children begin to produce short sentences. Usually it consists of one noun and one verb, like I go, or ball here, or doggy go. These two words put together have meaning and they give a sense of what the child wants, but it's not a full repertoire of all of our different grammar rules that we include in language. Usually about the 2.5 year mark is where children will go away from the two-word stage and almost flip a switch into normal speaking. And this happens very, very quickly. With my own child, it happened over the course of a week that she was saying two words together and then all of a sudden she was saying full sentences. So it happens really quickly. Like I said before, just because children are only saying 1 or 2 words at a time does not mean that they don't understand the grammar rules of our language. Now let's talk about some different concepts that are important to know when we talk about language. The first is overgeneralization. Overgeneralization is the process of extending something beyond the circumstance to which it actually applies. It's really common in children to generalize standard grammatical rules to apply to irregular words. So for example, a child is going to say my feets or my foots instead of feet for a plural version of foot, or goad, instead of using the actual irregular word that we know to use. Why? Because it's much simpler to apply that universal grammar rule to everything. It doesn't mean that they don't understand what they're trying to say, right? Like when they're saying the word goad, we know they're trying to say the word went. However, they don't understand that there's a separate irregular word for that past tense version of go. Next, let's talk about linguistic relativity. Linguistic relativity is the idea that the language we speak influences how we think and perceive the world. In really simple terms, it means that different languages can shape the way their speakers see things like time, space, and even colors. For example, some languages have many words for different types of snow, where others just have one word. This could lead to people who speak those languages to notice and think about snow in different ways. Another example is that in some languages, directions like north, south, east, and west are used more often than left and right. This might make speakers of those languages better at understanding directions and orienting themselves in space. So linguistic relativity suggests that the structure and vocabulary of a language can affect the thoughts, perceptions, and behavior of its speakers. The final thing we're going to talk about is the idea of universal grammar. Universal grammar is the idea that all human languages share a common structure or set of rules in our minds. It's like we have a built-in blueprint for language. No matter what language we learn, we are all born with the ability to understand and use language in similar ways. For example, every language has nouns, things, and verbs, actions, even though those words and rules might vary from language to language. Babies around the world learn to speak in similar stages, suggesting that there's something universal about how we learn language. So, universal grammar suggests that despite the huge variety of languages, all humans have an innate ability to learn any language because we all share that underlying structure of grammar.